Joining us now to break down this case is defense attorney Misty Marris. Misty, thank you for being here. This trial was quick, just 4 days, mainly because Ibarra waived his right to a jury trial. So it was really all up to the judge. What's your reaction to how all of this played out?
This really did go lightning speed through the courtroom. And if this had been before a jury, we absolutely would have seen more time, especially today, when it came down to closing arguments and ultimately getting a verdict and sentencing all in one court session. The reason being, when the judge is sitting on the bench and sitting in the chair of the juror, he becomes the finder of fact. So certain things that happen with a jury, like an explanation of the jury instructions, going through all of the elements of the law, that wasn't necessary under the circumstances. And so in this particular case, the judge was actually able to come to a verdict and make a determination on sentencing relatively quickly once the trial concluded.
No doubt, for sure. You know, many people may argue that Ibarra should be put to death for this, that being stuck behind bars maybe isn't harsh enough, given his background and what he did before. Why wasn't the death penalty an option here?
Interesting, because this was actually a highly controversial topic. So whether or not the death penalty is on the table is up to prosecutorial discretion. So the prosecutors who had this case initially determined that they were not going to pursue the death penalty. And in fact, months before this trial started, filed a document, which is required in these cases, to say that the maximum penalty they were going to seek is life without the possibility of parole. Now, there's a couple of reasons to do that. And under the statute in Georgia and in every state, death penalty cases require what's called aggravating factors. And that's an enumerated statutory list. This case could have fit into that. However, death penalty cases tend to move a lot slower. There's more opportunity for what's called interlocutory appeals. Those are appeals that happen before the trial begins. Because of that, it seems the prosecutors made the strategic decision to move forward with life without parole as their top-level punishment and go without pursuing the death penalty.
Got it. But the judge here sentenced Ibarra to life in prison with the possibility for parole for malice murder. But he also sentenced him to a second life sentence and 27 years in prison to be served consecutively. Help us understand that decision.
Absolutely. So it's difficult to break this down, and I understand why it's confusing, because even lawyers get a little confused when he's going through that verdict sheet. So remember, Ibarra was charged with 10 counts, 10 different crimes. But the first is malice murder. He was also charged with felony murder. Malice murder and felony murder are different theories, but ultimately lead to the same result, which is a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Under what's called the merger doctrine, you can't serve a sentence for both of those charges. So the felony murder charges basically go away. They merge into malice murder. In addition to that, the aggravated assault charge, that merges into malice murder. It's what's called a lesser included offense. And so the top level charge, malice murder, that's life without the possibility of parole. But the other felonies, attempted rape and kidnapping, those have different time frames, but they're served concurrently. That means at the same time. So regardless of those lesser sentences, Ibarra will be facing life without parole because of the top level charge that he was convicted of and ultimately given the highest sentence prosecutors were seeking.
Got it. No, thank you for breaking that down. So as a defense attorney, do you believe Ibarra's lawyer had any chance of winning this case, or what may have you done differently, if anything at all?
This was such a difficult case from the defense perspective because what the prosecutors had was DNA evidence. They had a fingerprint. They had DNA on Laken Riley of Jose Ibarra. And in addition to all of that DNA evidence, which comes down to experts, right? Whenever we cover a trial, there are ways to attack DNA and the veracity of that DNA. There's ways to attack the investigation. But something that was in this case was a whole lot of CCTV surveillance camera video, which was essentially tracking Jose Ibarra's path that day and putting him in a place where he had the opportunity, and the prosecution put together what was a motive for the crime. So look, it was an uphill battle for the defense. Strategically, they chose a bench trial, thinking they had a better shot with a judge than a jury, but it was always going to be a difficult defense case.
Yeah. You know, in some ways, this is justice for Laken Riley, but at the end of the day, a promising young woman who had her whole life ahead of her is now dead. Do you think today will bring any comfort to her family and friends?
It is horrible. And watching the victim impact statements, hearing from her mother, from her stepfather, from her father, her sister, and all of her friends, there is nothing that is going to bring her back. But something that the prosecutors pointed out in their statement was, look, put him behind bars forever. So they never have to worry about seeing him 30, 40, 50 years down the road, getting out of jail. And the judge gave an inspirational statement to them. He knows there's nothing that's going to bring her back, but he hopes that justice was served in this case, and that at some point, all of that horrible sadness and tragedy that they're feeling can turn into remembering what a wonderful, special, and promising young woman she was.
Misty, you bring great context to these stories.